7 o'clock, and looks like everyone's here. Shall we call the roll?
Maria Ryan.
Here.
Bart Bartels.
Here.
Todd Rusk.
Here.
Andrew Stumpf.
Here.
Rachel Valenga.
Here.
Stephen Wald.
Here.
Ryan Wolber.
Here.
All right. Well, that would be a quorum at least. Are there any changes to the agenda this evening? All right. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting?
I can do that.
All right.
I'll second.
Great. And I actually, when I saw the document come through, I noticed a couple of typos that were my fault when I was taking a look at the minutes. So I'm just going to, let's see here. Under new business, the third line, it says measurements. And that should say measurements. So if our mover and seconder wouldn't mind removing that F and then putting a period after years, because I also had another typo. Is that?
Sure, that's
All
fine.
right. Okay. Is there any further discussion or any other changes? Okay, all those in favor of approving with those corrections signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, those are approved. Okay, and next we have public input. I know we do have some video comment, but before we turn to that, are there any other members of the public present who wish to address us this evening? If you would state your name and address for the record, please.
To notice about meetings, and that's a lot what I comment on to the different commissions, because I think, how efficiently things are has a huge environmental dimension, as well as the democracy dimension, and so I was going to pull up the if I can switch with one button, to the, these are the bylaws, and you find them at the board page. There's 3 documents. One of them is the ordinance that formed Sustainability Advisory, and then the bylaws. So I was going to look through for a public comment law, because generally I think maybe I've learned from you in the past that you go by the city law, but I was going to read what the Open Meetings Act says. Any person shall be permitted, this was effective January 1st, 2011, any person shall be permitted an opportunity to address public officials under the rules established and recorded by the public body. And did anybody ever ask the state, like, does it have to be this public body that establishes those rules and records them? So that I was going to have some suggestions about, or just a small suggestion about public comment. I like the idea of letting the person have the uninterrupted 5 minutes, and even if they sort of start a couple questions in the course of the 5 minutes, that they yield after that, and then it's up to the chair to recognize them again at all. You could, okay, let's say you re-recognize them, but they keep on talking. I think it would be good to create a kind of a motion to cut them off. It's like some of the bylaws. Okay, I want to move just a couple things. I wondered if this commission would want to think about, like maybe there could be think about looking at the use cycle contracts and finding out if everything's going good with that. Like the trucks don't have to idle a long time while they look in toters that aren't working out real well or something. There are too many toters, or people need to wash them or something like that. Is there good enough feedback loop? There probably is, because Courtney's like so dedicated to that. But I also thought if there were ideas about the contracts, I found out they're about in the middle, halfway through those contracts now. So you could like design a committee to look into it, or something like that. Because okay, then another thing that I thought was that, how could I draw a blank? Okay, I forgot where I was going. Thank you.
Thank you. And are there other members of the public who wish to address us? Come on up and state your name and address for the record, please.
Just one sec. We will have a much easier conversation if you wait just one sec. Excuse me. Hello, Danielle Chenoweth. I live at 412 West Illinois Street in Urbana. And I know a lot of you are familiar faces, but just a few things. First, I served on city council from 2001 to 2008. And at that time, worked on a lot of different sustainability issues. Second, I'm a business owner in town. I co-own Pixo Technologies in downtown Urbana. And then third, I serve as the president of the Independent Media Center. So with that said, meaning I'm connected, I know a lot of people that'll come into this proposal in a sec. I am here to represent my neighbor Saba. Hold on one second.
A little more public comment.
Okay. So that's my son, Ezra. And we have a neighbor named Saba, who's 10 years old, who came by my house yesterday. And she asked me to help organize Urbana to take advantage of something called the Georgetown University Energy Prize. And so I think I've sent it to Scott, and he can send it off. I didn't have emails for all of you on the website, so if you could send it to the commission if you
I
haven't
did
already.
print one page on it and handed it to everyone.
Awesome. And so the quick and skinny on the commission is that it invites communities our size to plan and implement reduction in energy over the next 3 years. And the community that reduces energy the most while engaging its community in innovative and replicable ways will win $5 million. Although I think the $5 billion piece is actually not the point, because no matter what, you win because you reduce energy. And also there's a lot of technical assistance available for all the cities who participate. So I really think that's the piece. I mean, the $5 million sounds great, but I think that's the piece we're looking at. So all the competitors will receive assistance, including data, technical assistance, and access to financial resources. The quote is concrete financial resources. I don't have the details about that. I think we need to talk to the program officer, and also availability to apply for additional grants. I think this is a really fantastic and well-timed opportunity we should consider. I've been following the Climate Action Plan. It was something, when I was on council, we tried to move forward the concept of a zero waste goal, and also for us to address climate change locally, because honestly, that's where it's going to happen in this country, because we're just stalled when you go up the food chain. So it's going to be local communities, and especially the big cities working with medium-sized cities like ourselves to make certain goals and benchmarks. Not to give up on the federal government, but this is something we can do here. So the Climate Action Plan, which I've gotten a chance to look through the kind of executive summary and review, is very exciting, and I see this as kind of expanding on that project. It could provide an important outreach component, especially to engage young people in the schools. So Saba has agreed to reach out and help get community partners to sign on and do outreach to schools, helping them to establish goals and get the schools and families involved. I think that's an important piece to the Climate Action Plan, and she's already presented this competition to her school, and there's a lot of students who are interested. So I think she's entering the 6th grade next year, and she'll be in school in Urbana. So let's see. So I'd like to actually, she is at her grandmother's house. She couldn't get out of it. The parents are in charge of that one. And so she agreed to record. I just did a little 2-minute video of her speaking about this. So if you can indulge us for the second, I sent it to Jason Liggett at UPTV. Oh, it is?
Yeah,
okay.
sure.
Let's see.
And we do have a 5-minute time limit unless, would
Hi,
Commissioner
I'm
wanna have
Saba,
Okay,
and
this is
I
additional
live at 203 East Oregon,
time.
I'll move to.
and I want to urge you to be
Is
part
there-
of this rare.
Okay, here, I'll start again.
All those in favor?
I see. Yes, thank you for the
Quite all right.
process. Okay, so let's consider this as 5 minutes, but you've also extended. So this is her public input that she wasn't able to give. So let me just back up.
Hi, I'm Saba, and I live at 203 East Oregon, and I want to urge you to be part of this rare opportunity where you can be part of a competition in which Georgetown University gives you a $5 million prize if you reduce energy usage. If your community reduces energy usage a lot, and the community that reduces the most gets a $5 million reward. And it's a win-win situation because if you win the $5 million reward, then your whole community gets a portion of that money. And if you don't, then you will still gain a lot of respect and respect for the earth, and you will learn how to be more considerate of how you treat the earth, and it's a good opportunity for us to try to do that if we want to try to keep people and humanity living on Earth for a longer time, and yeah, and yeah, help everybody in this world as much as we can. So, thank you. Hi, I'm
Okay, so that's her public input. Just a couple of details. I sent the link to how to get started. We would need to fill out an application by June 30th. And please note, we can apply even without setting a letter of intent in. That was due in April, but I checked and they're still accepting application. A link to the full guidelines, which are in PDF form. And it appears, I didn't want to actually fill out the application information with your name, for example, so it might make sense for you to do that, and then they send you the full application. It does seem like we have to provide some energy data up front, but I know that the city has been collecting that as part of the work that you're doing. So anyway, I wanted to offer myself as a resource and networker. I think between Saba and I, we probably could provide, link to most of the community partners. And of course, we welcome support, but I know you have to list community partners, so I'd be happy to create a survey and have folks basically sign on as community partners if that's helpful, and kind of do some of the legwork before the 30th. And Saba has also agreed to do that with the schools and some of our youth partnerships. So that's all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Chenoweth?
Danielle, thanks for bringing this forward. I've had a chance to look at this as well, and so I've looked at the process, and I guess I'll just put out. So I'm glad to hear that you're willing to do some organizing and help on this, and I'm working with people on campus. Trying to figure out, so with all kinds of different collaborators on how to do sustainability, energy efficiency, all kinds of things in communities on a community scale. So I'm willing to step up on this as well. And I guess another thing to say just about logistics of the application process. It looks like a pretty straightforward application for June, and then the real work is a deadline that is in November of this year, which is actually making the long-term plan. And but anyway, so one possibility is that we can roll that into our ongoing Phase 2 climate action plan process. And so I think one of our hurdles is going to be, getting more detailed information out of Ameren, more than what we've been able to get so far. So that's going to be one of the things that we're going to. I mean, there's lots of details, but I think that's going to be one of the things. So, anyways, that's all that to say that I'm excited about this, and I'd throw in some effort on this and round up collaborators, that I work with.
Great. Other comments? I don't know, is this something that staff would be interested in pursuing?
Sure, I'm certainly willing to take a look at it, especially if there's other interested partners. That always is promising.
Okay. You have my contact information.
Yeah.
So let me know. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for your service.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
And tell thank you to Saba as well. All right, let's turn to communications and the monthly staff report.
Good evening. Apologies for so many paper handouts tonight. Just a lot of things coming together at the last minute. I'm happy to announce that we have hit our first top level goal for the Urbana-Champaign Energy Star Challenge. It says 50. We actually have 51 buildings registered for the challenge now. The last two, or the most recent two, were both Busey Bank locations, and I think they have more locations still to come that they're going to put into the challenge. And the second goal for that challenge was to get at least half of those buildings to benchmark their 2013 energy performance on Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And so far we've got 22 buildings that have turned in their 2013 energy performance. So we're moving along well. Also wanted to inform you there is a consortium or association of regional planning councils that is working with DOE's Sunshot Initiative. One particular program of their Sunshot Initiative called Solar Market Pathways. And the city of Urbana, along with the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission has sent a letter of interest, I believe they're calling it, so sort of a light version of a grant application to join this association's program. And what we're proposing, because it's all about developing the local solar market, solar energy market, wherever you are, we've proposed a series of strategies to improve the solar marketplace here, remove regulatory barriers, permitting barriers, financial barriers, and information barriers. So we're hopeful that we'll get a good response from that and be able to get some resources to move forward with developing more on-site renewables here in our region. Bike to Work Day was a smashing success this year given the weather. The weather was quite poor for biking, but Urbana still retained the Bike to Work Day Workplace Challenge Award, slightly edging out City of Champaign employees. Happy to report. I can show you tonight that the 2007 and 2013 greenhouse gas inventories are essentially done with a caveat. For 2013, we do not have updated transportation data from the Regional Planning Commission, nor do we have updated transit data from the Mass Transit District. I've simply taken the 2007 numbers and transcribed them over. Probably both figures will be improved from 2007. MTD has more hybrid buses since then, and RPC thinks that our mode share has probably become more energy efficient. However, all we can do is take some temporary figures and put those in and make plans based on that. It's not going to make a huge difference. The general picture, I think, will be the same, but those are kind of temporary figures until we get the final data. I'm also going to be working with the sponsor or the owner of the application, ICLEI. They're going to, they don't have the capacity to look at every single number we enter and audit it, but they can answer specific questions about specific data that I've entered. And so there's just two things, the Renewable Portfolio Standard and the renewable energy credits that I'm going to have them take a look at. And I'm hopeful that'll happen, if not this week, maybe next week. Did you have a question, Steve?
I'm curious what the data cycle, generation cycle is for both automobiles and MTD. I mean, do they regularly collect that data on a multi-year basis, or are we ever likely to see numbers again?
Right. I was under the impression that it was annually, but I think they've had some changes there. There's still staff changes, and they're still working on their model. Right now, their primary focus is county-wide data, and so splitting that down into the city is another task. And so this could be several months.
Okay.
No, do you know if there's a way that we could help with that? I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know how that would be.
Feel
but-
free to offer, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there was a ratio between the county-wide data and the Urbana data then that you could apply to county data now.
Is that how they brought it down? Was just a ratio?
I don't know, but whatever
Yeah.
ratio did exist in that year could be applied again
Sure.
and applied on the countywide, most recent countywide, even if it was 2012 or so.
Yeah, I don't know if they take the county data and just apply a per capita thing, or if they're really looking at specific Urbana data. I don't know the answer.
They may have, but it's likely to be more accurate than just carrying forward the 2007 data and commingling it with.
Yeah. I don't think they're done with the county-wide data yet either, is my impression.
Okay.
Just a note on public engagement. Courtney Rushforth had a presentation, and I also had a presentation at the Illinois Public Works Association recently. That was fun to talk to a slightly different audience, and so we hope to do more of that. It's good to get into conferences and events where people haven't already heard the story you're telling. a couple of items before we leave the Climate Action Plan segment that are recent and not in the report. It was briefly announced at Council last night that the Regional Planning Commission received grant funding to conduct a countywide pedestrian, I don't know if it's a master plan or pedestrian audit or a sidewalk audit, something to that effect. They're going to be creating some sort of large data set about the state of or completeness or state of repair of our pedestrian infrastructure. So this is something that's been on council goals for a number of years, just waiting for funding. So I think that's pretty important that that's going to move forward hopefully now. Also wanted to share, you may have seen on our website or in the newspaper, the electricity rates for Ameren's just regular grid power have come out. They are slightly lower than our municipal electric aggregation. But the way our contracts meet or beat clause is structured, we have several pieces of our price. There are several different pieces that make up our total price. And our meet or beat clause does not get activated. So our municipal electric aggregation program is still in place. What we're doing is communicating to folks that, as always, they have a choice. They can choose a ever so slightly lower price with the Ameren grid, a weighted average, because there's a summer and a non-summer rate. A weighted average is 4.505 cents per kilowatt over the course of the year. And they'll get 9%, that's the renewable portfolio standard, green power out of that. Or they can choose the city's municipal electric aggregation, and that rate is set every month for 2 years at 4.746 cents. So a very small difference, and the municipal electric aggregation is, of course, 100% green power through renewable energy credits. So we're just sharing information that folks have a choice and they can opt out. If they do opt out, they cannot come back into aggregation for a year. If they opt out and stay on Ameren, they won't be able to leave Ameren and go to an alternative retail electric supplier if they stay on Ameren for, I think it's 60 days or something to that effect. So they can't go back and forth, but you do have a choice of your supplier.
Scott?
Yes.
Do you? I know you've reported in past meetings on participation in the aggregation program, and so, anyways, just with that news, I think it'll be interesting to hear if there is a response from that, next couple of months or something.
Yeah. So our vendor provides the opt-out percentages, and it's been 4%. Have opted out, 96% have stayed in.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, what the opt-out is after this.
Are you familiar, or do you know, or can we anticipate marketing, phone calls?
Well, I suspect Ameren won't do that. I don't know. And I also suspect that there are not going to be any other alternative retail electric suppliers that are going to beat Ameren's price. Probably not going to be able to beat our price either. There's a number of vaguely understood factors that lead to the Ameren price, and probably won't be this low 2 years from now, may not be this low 1 year from now, and probably never again. Especially considering the changes that are likely to come in our energy marketplace. I gave you all a one-page fact sheet that the White House has put out about their power plant emission standards that they've proposed. Again, it's a market, so there's a certain amount of risk. Last item I wanted to share, and I also put a two-page or one-page, both sides copy in front of you. Council passed their mayor and council goals for the next 2 years. I just printed the 2 pages that are in the environmental sustainability section. And on the screen, I've just got what I've reorganized it into a spreadsheet so that it can be tracked over time. I'll be taking out, for my own purposes, I'll be taking out the section that deals with the market because the market has its own coordinator. And I think there's one goal in there that is specifically earmarked for CD, for community development, so I'll take that out as well. SAC had sent a memo to council asking for a needs assessment for gray and green infrastructure. That wasn't taken up in council goals. It is, on the gray infrastructure side, it may be seen as already incorporated in the capital improvements plan, which is essentially roads and stormwater, sewers. But that did not make it into council goals. And if you take a look at the screen where we've got the updated tracking for the new council goals, a lot of these are actually things that we've already started to take a look at. And now that we've got council approval to evaluate a lot of these, we can move forward quickly, I hope, within the calendar year. And here's our graph. None completed, of course, but quite a few of these items are already in progress. Oh, there's nothing on your screen? Not sure why it's not on the TV, but it's on the screen behind you. There's also a pie graph in your council, in your commission packet for climate action plan progress, and I also printed out this same tracking sheet for the climate action plan. And we're at 72% complete, and I would expect 72% complete, 13% in progress. That last 15% that's in queue, there's a number of items that I think probably we're not going to get to. So that 15% I don't expect is likely to change. We'll see. But I think that 13%, we may be able to bring that into the completed. Yeah, I don't know. It's just, I just pulled it out of. Okay, moving on to the water plan. I got final sales totals by email about half an hour ago, so I haven't actually looked at them. It's going to be close to the estimate that they gave us. About 400 total products sold this year, 575 sold last year. And quite a few people taking advantage of Urbana's stormwater utility fee. These are actually the first rebate, or in the terminology of the stormwater utility program, the first incentives that the city has been through this sale. So that's good to see. Also glad to report that our goal to replace all the faucet aerators in city-owned facilities is as complete as it's going to be. There are a small number of non-standard faucet sizes that we can't find replacement aerators for. So those will probably remain until remodeling or an unfixable leak or some other reason that sink in total is replaced. Also very exciting, the city of Urbana has been awarded a small sponsored research grant through the Illinois Sustainable Technology Center. This is part of their 1 billion gallons campaign. They're working to save or conserve 1 billion gallons of potable water in the state of Illinois. So what we've done is set up 2 different studies to test irrigation controls, automated irrigation controls, to see if such controls are going to save us water on our automated irrigation systems. So the grant essentially pays for the equipment and the installation, and we'll do the monitoring and reporting. And this would be a very rare data set. This type of testing is not done in Illinois or the Midwest because we've typically been blessed with water, and we're usually trying to get rid of it rather than save it. In places like Florida and California, there's lots of data about using automated irrigation controls and what kind of water conservation savings you can get versus just having a timer. You may have attended the US EPA's sole source aquifer designation public meeting. It was, every seat in the room was filled, people standing as well. Every comment I heard, I didn't stay the entire night, every comment I heard was in support of the designation, and the meeting's entire premise was that EPA was proposing to approve the designation, and now we'll take public comment on that proposed approval. So very confident and hopeful that that will be brought to a successful conclusion soon. The Regional Planning Commission is creating an advisory panel to study sustainable water supply in Champaign County, and they've asked a number of people, including Public Works, to have a seat on that advisory panel. So we'll be supporting that effort, and that ties in with some of our regional collaboration goals in the water plan, and so we're glad to be supporting that effort. There are some specific tasks that this panel wants to complete, and I've listed those there. I won't read them, but they're there for you. Another item that just came together today, so it's not in the packet, one of our goals in the water plan was to cultivate an appreciation, let's see if I can remember the wording, a cultivated appreciation for the ecological and economic and recreational value of Urbana's new waterfront at the Boneyard Creek. And I think it actually said green infrastructure and surface waters and so forth in our plan. Just this morning, we was able to start getting a group together, thanks to Rachel, who are going to participate in a Mississippi Basin-wide citizen science project this Saturday at 10 a.m. at the Boneyard Creek. We will be taking a sample where the construction site is right now, and hopefully back there again next year, and it'll be a much more pleasant place to take a sample, I'm sure. But the project is called Little Miss Atrazine, and it's hosted by a professor at the University of Nebraska, I believe. And what they're doing is taking a really simple test and trying to distribute it widely across the entire Mississippi drainage basin. And so they're sending simple test strips, chemical test strips, out to any interested parties, and we are one of those parties now. And you take the test, wait 10 minutes, and you're actually posting through social media to populate this data set. So you're just posting yes or no whether you got a hit in your sample for atrazine. Atrazine is a suspected, I think it's a neurotoxin, endocrine disruptor. It's pretty devastating to a lot of amphibians, and it's quite commonly used in the Midwest for broadleaf control. So it's used on corn. It's also used at the household level as well. So it'd be very interesting to see what we get from our testing, but even more importantly, it'd be extremely valuable, large data set. And I think that's something we can participate in and grow as we move forward through the years. Some unfortunate news in recycling. The state's only carpet recycler up in Chicago just closed their operations. We were in discussions with them, working to set up a carpet recycling drop-off point here in Urbana-Champaign, and they've had to close their doors, and there is no other carpet recycler for a few states. So that's unfortunate. The market apparently is pretty thin for recycled carpet material. However, there is legislation introduced in the state to create a product stewardship program for carpet recycling, whereby the purchaser pays in a small amount at the point of purchase, and that covers a statewide carpet collection and recycling system. There's also similar legislation for paint stewardship in the state of Illinois. This is something that's been growing quite quickly across the country in state legislatures, all through the Product Stewardship Institute, who works very closely with industry associations. That's how they're able to be successful in introducing these state-based legislation. And on that note, the Product Stewardship Institute is creating an Illinois Product Stewardship Council, and Urbana's recycling coordinator, Courtney Rushworth, will most likely be serving on that council. So we will definitely be the first to know about everything going on with product stewardship. Our next meeting would be scheduled for July 1st, 7 p.m., council chambers. There is also a tentatively scheduled joint meeting to have RPC present the long-range transportation plan July 10th in this room at 7:30, and it's not finalized, but if you can check your calendars for that date, July 10th, 7:30, we are working to try and bring the Plan Commission, Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Commission, and the Sustainability Advisory Commission all into one room for one presentation from the Regional Planning Commission.
On our agendas, it says June 10th. Is it June 10th or July 10th?
I believe it's July. What page is that?
There's under announcements on the on our agendas. It said Joint Plan Commission, et cetera, et cetera. 6:10,
Yeah.
14, but it's 7:10?
Yes,
Okay, great.
tentatively scheduled. I'll be sending you an email when it's confirmed.
Great.
We have 28 people to try and collaborate with. Does that immediately strike anyone as being a conflict?
All right.
I have a question before
Brian,
you.
yeah, go ahead.
On the council goals, in that first objective, item G, evaluate city organized group purchasing of residential solar systems. I'm just curious why that one was crossed off. If you happen to know.
I don't know.
Okay. I don't take it as we don't do that kind of thing here, but I was just.
There was a secondary sentence there that was added either by council or other staff, and I don't know if that played into it or not. But I think it was a little different program than what I was envisioning for that. That group, another announcement, that type of group solar purchasing is precisely what City of Chicago, or actually some groups with some support from City of Chicago, are introducing in Chicago metropolitan region right now. It's never been done before in state of Illinois. It's been done in a few other states. Part of the reason it hasn't been done in Illinois is because grid power is so cheap. It's very difficult to bring solar anywhere close. And it's still not going to be anywhere close no matter what you do, as to compare to California, where grid price is 20 cents and solar price is 22. It doesn't take much to get somebody to go for it. But that's going to happen in City of Chicago, and we're going to monitor that closely. And we've already considered that type of program in the letter of interest that I mentioned to you for the Solar Market Innovations Grant. That would be one of about 4 different strategies that we would employ to improve our solar marketplace.
Thanks.
Are there other comments or questions? Okay, let's move along to continuing business in the greenhouse gas inventory.
Can you all see the screen on your screens now? Yes? Okay. I guess I will use this computer. Okay, so we've looked at this before. I'll just review where we're at real quickly. So this is from a 2013 inventory out to 2050. I'm turning off these goal dotted lines because they don't work right. We set our goal based on a 2007 baseline. However, when you enter in your 25% or whatever it is from your baseline, it takes it from your inventory year on that particular projection. So it's basing our 2020 goal on the 2013 inventory instead of carrying it back to 2007. For your information, it's 404,000 kilowatt hours is our 2020 goal. So you can see with this orange trend line, which trends downward rather than upward as a business as usual scenario, trends downward because of the renewable portfolio standard. That's one of the entries that I'm going to have ICLEI check to make sure I've entered it correctly. But the renewable portfolio standard actually brings us to let's see, right about, it brings us almost to our 2020 goal all by itself. This dip here is the impact of taking a chunk out of this red bar, which is residential energy, and that's from renewable energy credits. So it doesn't zero it out because it's residential energy, not residential kilowatts, so you still have natural gas in there. So that's an enormous chunk. You can see that the renewable portfolio standard and renewable energy credits are enormously powerful in reducing our greenhouse gases. So that's sort of grid level, big picture items. When you come down to all the different interventions, and not everything that you could ever imagine is pre-programmed in here as a measure. When you start turning these on, like 25, let's do 25 4 kilowatt residential solar energy systems. So that's 25 household scale systems a year for, for 10 years, and it makes no difference. You can't see it. So you think about what it takes. I mean, there's, 2, 3 in the city now. And if we were to add 25 a year for 10 years, it doesn't bend the line in an observable manner. It's there. It's just you can't see it because it's so small. So I'd try a couple of these other ones. Benchmarking, it's kind of interesting that they've put that in there. That's what the Urbana-Champaign Energy Star Challenge is doing right now. No difference. And home energy performance, this is, I'm working to model, again, 10 years there. I'm working to model the program that we did with stimulus funds. See the difference there? The little gap between the orange line. So that was we know that was a enormously successful program in terms of what we got, for our dollar. A lot of kilowatts saved for our dollar, a lot of metric tons of CO2 reduced for our dollar. And that's one of the better measures that I've entered in here in terms of, what's realistic. And it takes a little slice out there, but it's small. So I'm sharing this just to make the point that you really need big things to bend that line a lot. It's pretty impressive. So I wanted to switch over.
Hey, before you leave
Mhm.
that thought, so I really appreciate that that perspective on it, and I guess maybe this has occurred to you already, but I think in the phase 2 write-up that we work on, I think some presentation on sensitivity analysis, and how really big things have to be in order to get a significant change. I think a sensitivity analysis would add a lot of value to the report and provide some of that perspective.
And I should say, before we just say, oh, we're not doing anything if it isn't big, a lot of things that have a small greenhouse gas impact might have other co-benefits. And so for the little bit of greenhouse gases plus the co-benefits, they might be a desirable public policy. But just making the point, if you're only looking at carbon emissions, a lot of these things are small on the big scale that we're looking at. That's all.
I just wanted to briefly comment on how this might be a bit. You might not be highlighting as much work as you're doing there, in that the business as usual. At least when I did it from a university perspective, the business as usual, the renewable portfolio standard, was not part of business as usual. So that actually increased, your
Oh, yeah.
your rate of decrease. So my guess would be ICLEI will probably come back and say that, yeah, somehow that needs to be part of the reduction rather than part of the business as usual.
That the renewable portfolio standard shouldn't be.
Should be part of the reduction,
It should be a measure
not-
rather than a
not something
context.
included business as usual.
They've given direction to put it in as a factor set and apply the factor set to your and I can show you all this. They've described to put it in as a factor set and to include that factor set in your forecast. And then your forecast is called upon by the planning module. So that's why it's ended up as this context here. And I'll show you real quickly where it's at. In factor set, they've had us put it in as part of growth rates, which could be a growth rate or decline rate of anything. So we have a population growth rate here, and we have renewable portfolio standard. And these are additional, not total. That's why they're not the actual phase-in schedule. That leads to the forecast, and you design your forecast. It's not populating our forecasts. You design your forecast with certain factor sets in mind, so you can create a number of factor sets for different expectations that you might want to test and create different forecasts. So, and then those lead to different planning scenarios, which apparently they're all disappearing now. So ICLEI server must be down.
Perfect timing. Well, obviously, go with what they say, but
And like I said, I'm gonna have them look at the RPS and the renewable energy credits, because those are the two most important things right now in our inventory.
exactly.
Okay, I want to turn your attention to a couple of pages from a phase 2 climate action plan. I'm going to pull it up here. You have a copy in your packet, I think. So these images are kind of placeholders, just trying to swap out something different from what we had on the cover last time. The color is green instead of blue, so you can immediately identify it. Standard stuff. This is all placeholder, that's why it's all over the place. This is from a public engagement board I've used a couple of times to set the context for what we're talking about when we're talking about creating or implementing a climate action plan. And so this is just a really quick way to tell people where we're at. And so Maria had asked about whether we should have a list of accomplishments in this phase 2 plan of what we had accomplished in the first phase. And so I did that real quick here. I'm thinking, I don't know if there's a way to make this a little more visually interesting, maybe split it into outputs and outcomes, and then put some statistics and measures maybe with the outcomes. We don't have a lot of outcomes. They're mostly outputs. But there may be a way to at least get some numbers in there instead of just having a sentence. So that may develop. And then the results from all these focus groups and surveys, I think what I'm considering now is just mentioning them up here and putting them in as an appendix instead of putting pie graphs from survey results kind of up front. If people are really interested, I think they can go to the appendix. These are the outputs from our tool. They are the categories are a little bit different than what the tool outputted in 2007. I don't think in 2007 there was a category for water and wastewater. That has been incorporated in the U.S. Greenhouse Gas Accounting Protocol, which our ICLEI tool is built on top of. That's kind of like the policy. ICLEI is the operationalizing of the policy. And why they decided that these two activities needed to be pulled out, I can't say for sure. All they've said is they wanted cities to understand the impact of water and wastewater. Well, it looks really small, right? The impact looks really small. Why are we bothering? Well, for our inventory, electricity from a water plant is included in commercial or industrial electricity. We have a private water company, so we don't have ready access to how much electricity they use. Wastewater, same thing. Their electricity is incorporated in industrial electricity usage. And so we don't have that level of that fine-grained level in that particular category. It may be something that we would want to work to develop those relationships in the future where we can get that kind of data exchange from the water company and the wastewater district. At this point, what is populating the wastewater is some population-based formulas that output greenhouse gases from treatment operations. Gases released from wastewater treatment, for instance. I do have some specifics from the sanitary district on how much biogas they capture and reuse on site, so that's incorporated in there as well. So you can see the graphs, and I don't know if those are terribly clear. I don't think I'm zoomed in all the way here.
Hey Scott, on the water and the wastewater, in case it's, I've had experience of talking with water, drinking water plants and also wastewater treatment plants, and they haven't had a problem with sharing their energy use, and so they just the simple response of what's your energy use and what are your gallons of water, coming up. So I don't know if anyways, we might be able to get some of that information. Not that you haven't tried already, but
yeah, I'm still working to get community-wide water consumption data from the water company as well for 2013. They were in a situation where the one person who knew how to query that data retired.
Right.
So.
Right.
challenge.
And then maybe you addressed this question before, but the municipal, did that category get lumped into commercial?
Yes.
Okay.
There is so I showed you the community greenhouse gas track on that ICLEI tool. There is a government track where, sort of as an operation, you
Okay.
put in all of your
Okay.
inputs. I haven't even started that yet.
Okay.
I would like to, but I haven't started it. Just looking at our electricity consumption for city facilities, it's something like 1% of the total community.
Yeah.
So in terms of pulling it out as a separate category in this display, it probably doesn't make much sense. It would be nice to know where we're at and track where we're at, though.
Right. But also the absence of it as a category, it's noticeable, even if it's small.
Mhm.
It raises a question.
Mhm. So this is very similar. I was hoping to pull it up on the other screen here. This total greenhouse gases is very similar to our 2007 baseline. As I mentioned before, different tool, it's different iterations of the same data set, and that's where we're at. And in 2007, the original data we got, I think it also came out to 16 metric tons per person. Going down to 2013, you can see our greenhouse gases have gone up. Population has gone up. I somehow missed putting in the total here. It's actually 15 metric tons per person. So per capita, we've gone down, although our greenhouse gases have gone up. And per capita doesn't matter so much for our climate action plan, as the goals are not pegged to per capita. They are just absolute goals.
Scott, I'm just curious if you had any explanation for the industrial energy consumption. It just seemed to go up. It was at 8,000 in 2007 and went up to 31. I didn't know if any insight into that.
Data collection.
Okay.
How different users are categorized in Ameren's computer system, and it's very different. If you look at our original data set that we created in 2007, commercial and industrial are almost equal. So what's happened is a bunch of industrial users have been put into commercial. It's part of the challenge when the data is not yours.
So a couple questions. First, I don't think I tracked the infographic treatment on either of these pages, the circle versus the rectangle. What's the rectangle?
It's the same data, just in a different graph.
But the colors proportionally totally don't match.
Yeah, it's one of the things that we've talked to ICLEI about, and they're hoping they can fix that in the near term. What happens is when you generate a display, it, I guess, randomly selects the colors every time you generate the display.
Okay. Well,
So you come back to the same thing later.
I would recommend going with, two things. You could just go with one or the other.
One or the
and
other.
Also, juxtaposing the graphs would be useful rather than having them on different pages.
Yeah.
Because it's just the visual is hard to work with.
Yeah.
No, one really low-tech workaround to that is on the PDF document itself, just putting a white box on top of it to make it go away,
Yeah.
and
That's
then
lots of ways.
making an Excel where you can, control it and then stick that on top of the
Right.
white box.
Yeah.
And so this increase is population driven. I mean, the economy, U.S., as you know, nationally dropped a lot
Yeah.
between 2007 and 2013, like 15% or something. So we grew instead.
Yes, and I have gas and electric grid consumption on the other display. What I can tell you from it, I'll put it in the final document. Our electric consumption kind of dropped in 2007, slightly recovered, and then started slowly dropping again. So that seems like a trend. Gas did the same thing, but then spiked in 2013. So 2014 may come back down, or 2015. So that's kind of the context where we're at. gosh, I wish I could show you some of this. What I wanted to do was transition into, taking this as our context, transition into what we want for big picture goals for the second phase of the Climate Action Plan. I think council goals are a good place to start. Some of those items are not extremely impactful in terms of greenhouse gases. They're good strategies and good policies. I think they have some co-benefits. Some of the other ones I think are bigger. But we've talked about this grant opportunity or reward opportunity. Actually, they don't pay you anything until you're actually done with your program. But I think now we need to start talking about that. I've sketched out some ideas, and I'm gonna let you all talk for a minute, and I'll put it on my USB, and I'll transfer it over to the other computer.
Is there discussion?
When we did phase one, we did a lot of work on that. We spent some time in working groups, and anyways, sometimes Scott's doing great work, and there's a lot there, and anyways, I guess I personally would like to get more hands-on, and because I'm sometimes just hearing myself looking at Scott and saying, hey, do this, do that. I think you need some more. And so I'd like I'd like an opportunity to get hands in there. And so one thing I would propose is, we figure out how to spend some more time on it ourselves. Anyway, so just a couple of thoughts. So I was thinking about sensitivity analysis, and another thing is, so this is not exactly getting to the goals, but in the spirit of understanding the context and the perspective of the magnitude of the challenge of meeting these goals is, on a category by category basis, actually putting some numbers to what does it take in the residential sector to proportionally realize its proportion of the goal. So we could even break it down to, say, the average house. The average house is here right now, and in terms of, say, kilowatt hour savings in natural gas, something that because I'm imagining that we're gonna need to call on the help of other people in the community, and I think they'll need some clear guidance or some goal sets, and so goals on how do we more working groups like we had with the industrial group, and also there was the residential rental. If there's interest, and people are willing to participate in that, it'd be really, I would like to kind of expand on that sensitivity analysis idea, and also put in, okay, these are the goals that we need to meet for, say, the commercial sector, and maybe think about expanding. Maybe some of our goals should be thinking hard about, and actually putting some more effort and energy into recruiting stakeholders that are going to be participating in these kinds of things, including, of course, there's all the usual suspects, that are doing energy and sustainability things, but then there's also the building owners and operators, and, money is a thing in here, so, thinking about finance. And so anyway, those are just some just kind of scattered thoughts on process for us going forward. And anyways, I in terms of specific goals, I'm not prepared to offer those up right now.
One question I had, we had the briefing and the action on the solar piece, which is good, although you kind of summarized that the economics of that weren't really promising, to expect that to kind of run away and make economic sense. I was curious if we had, I mean, obviously insulation pays for itself, and there's analysis of what the payback period is. It's been several years since I looked at it. I feel like I remember geothermal systems had something like a 6 or a 7 year payback. And I don't know, given changing prices of power and things like that, natural gas, whether that's still true. Does anyone have a figure top of mind?
I've heard more like 16 or 17 years. Yeah, longer payback, I think.
I mean, it's expensive, but not compared to solar panels or personal windmills and these kinds of things. So,
And that's not to dismiss it, you know.
So I've got on the screen data for that CDAC compiled, more like a ranking list that CDAC compiled for us. And they show payback periods for a number of different interventions. There's a even more important display of this. I don't know if I've got it with me tonight or not. No, I don't. They also did analysis of ranking essentially the same interventions by their metric tons of greenhouse gas offset per dollar. And it's somewhat similar ranking. Programmable thermostat is, number one. Our home energy performance program, I think, if I remember correctly, the programmable thermostat was number one, and it was $90 per metric ton carbon that it would offset. And our home energy performance program was $70 per metric ton, and that's including Ameren's money in it. Our money alone was $6. So it's a really good deal. And you saw it was powerful enough based on our past performance to bend that curve a little bit.
While you have that list up, just thinking about how we go about addressing the challenge. We're dealing with secondary aggregated data sets, and we don't have a lot of specific information. But with smart metering, and there's a lot more affordable and low cost sensors. And we have, I think, a pretty interested population, and we have a lot of people who are interested in doing research around these things. Maybe I think one goal or one thing that we could propose in phase 2 is data monitoring. Really doing some sensing. Looking for volunteers. How do we get a statistically significant population size that is willing to, to have their homes or their businesses censored up, and I think that can, give us a lot of really valuable data. I mean, research. There's a lot of researchers that would pay money for that kind of stuff, and give us some real hard data that can help inform some of the strategies that would actually, for real, make sense.
Well, we are scheduled to get smart grid meters in this region, hopefully next calendar year. And there will be some monies made available to do some public engagement on what a smart, well, I don't know exactly what form it's going to take, but it's going to be public engagement around smart grid meters. So that may be an opportunity to partner with either the foundations that are doing the public engagement or Ameren, who's doing the rollout per state rules.
Yeah. If I could just throw out one other thought on the process of generating the climate action plan. Maybe we want to engage some stakeholders in a more robust way while we're actually doing the climate action plan, and get some feedback on some things that we can actually put in the plan. But I think there's a lot of people that would be interested in weighing in on this, and that have professional or research interests in community level climate action planning. And so that might be something, and and I can help making a lot of those connections. But I think we could leverage some great expertise to help us inform our process.
Yeah, I agree. I think that and be good because I think that one of the advantages I think of the way that we ended up developing the CAP 1 is I think that we did. I think I'd have to say, like, I don't think we got as engaged with others in the community as I would have liked, but I think it was to a greater extent than we have in a little while, and I think that would be a really good opportunity for doing that, because I think, especially when we're getting into phase 2 is going to be the stuff that's a little more difficult to implement, and I think we're going to need to forge those connections.
Just referencing that Georgetown University prize and the way that may relate to phase 2. In the one-page handout, I didn't have a chance to look at the link. I don't think it actually states the criteria or the basis on which the prize is. It's for total reduction in measured energy use.
I've skimmed it, and it appears to be outcomes at the community level, greenhouse gas outcomes at the community level based on your own baseline, whether it's percentage per capita, total, I don't know.
Okay. I mean, obviously, you can't plan on winning the 5 million, but that would change a lot of.
That would solve all of our problems.
Certainly, prize-based, and activities like this are meant to induce expenditure and progress, on a massive scale, far more than $5 million once could do. But I don't know, how feasible, how tangible we can let the prospect of winning get for us, for our actions. But anyway, clearly the conversation about bending that curve and the ability to do that are sobering when you think about, winning a prize, a national prize for doing so the most.
If I could just follow up on the topic of outreach. I really wasn't going to talk about this tonight, but the Green Office Challenge which took place in Chicago last year, is kind of being launched now throughout Central Illinois. Perhaps that's a good connection with the community outreach aspect, and maybe even data collection, like Todd is talking about, because it's going to mostly be office buildings in this challenge, but maybe that fills a need for a piece of the pie. And like you said, I would like to be more involved.
I think the Georgetown Challenge is residential. Is that correct, Todd?
It's residential and municipal owned.
Okay. So they cut out the one thing, the Green Office
it's
Challenge.
A small
is
piece of the pie.
Well, it's the biggest wedge on our total.
Right.
That's the thing that we haven't been able to implement much on so far. So in that sense, definitely.
Yeah, the interesting thing, our original climate action plan looked at sector, like residential versus commercial, and it looked at fuel, gas versus electric. But when you see the impact of the RPS, it's all electricity, commercial, residential, electric. Nobody has to choose or opt in. It just happens. So those big picture power supply interventions are really interesting, and we've already taken a step towards that. We had I would say a very serious meeting with other cities, university, and talked to the wind farm developer that owns the wind farm in Vermilion, and talked about what it would take for people to get together or individually and buy wind power and RECs bundled together, which some people will say is the same as buying them unbundled. Others say it is not. I think either way, they are both market signals and perhaps different market signals. But that's something that we're certainly going to continue to evaluate and see if we can get together with partners. I wanted to also share with you before we get too far into planning. This poster is on my wall in my office, so I'm reminded for goal making, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time bound. Time bound we already got done because we have 2020 and we have 2050. The others we'll need to remind ourselves. And then the difference between outputs and outcomes. Outputs are the things you do. They're the activities. They should not be construed as being outcomes, which are the achievements that you actually make. The million metric tons or whatever it might be. So I've got a few. This is a kind of a conservative list of potential interventions that we could consider for the second phase of the Climate Action Plan. Some of these are also in council goals. I've tried to pick items that are, I've tried to be similar to the same categories we had in our first Climate Action Plan, not the same. And I tried to pick items that were either well within our control or impactful or both. Not all of them probably follow that. Some of them are just good public policies and they're in council goals. So I'll go through them real quick. Evaluate funding for the Urbana Home Energy Performance Program. That's the extra rebates that we provided through Ameren. That's the program that was able to get a metric ton for $70, really cheap, right? So evaluate if there's a way to finance that again. It didn't immediately have anything that was well within our control and impactful, or at least impactful in a way that I can measure or project in the ICLEI tool for gasoline consumption. That was essentially transportation. That was one of our goal categories before. There are some activities in that realm that I'm very interested in, but I'm not sure of the impact of it. So, for instance, I'm very interested in incorporating LEED for neighborhood development into our zoning code as an option for developers. I tried to model it, and like so many of the other measures, it didn't bend the curve. I still think it's a great idea, but I can't tell you it's going to save us, right? Did you have a comment? Okay. Moving into a new category that was not in our previous plan, renewable energy purchasing or installation, or as an on-site installation. Evaluate the purchase of renewable energy credits or renewable energy installations for city facility electricity consumption. So that's what we took a look at about a year ago. Was, can the city just sign a long-term agreement with a wind developer and buy all their power from their wind turbine for 20 years? Well, it turns out our demand is not high enough to have them, go to construction. If we were lumped in with some other large users, that would work. That's a potential. And it also has the co-benefit of telling our facilities management precisely how to budget for their utilities costs for 20 years. It would either be a fixed rate or it would be a specified escalation rate. That we can budget for that. Certainty is its own value.
Scott, on
yes.
on that point, how much demand gets a player in the game?
I think our demand for the city was 3 million kilowatt hours a year. I think that sounds right, and that was like half a wind turbine. So. And they're probably not going to go through all the transactional costs of taking out a loan
Sure.
and everything to build one wind turbine, especially when we're only going to buy half the power. So you need to get a few cities or a university or a utility company to buy in,
Right.
and then I think you can piggyback on a deal.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
One thing that's not entirely clear is whether you can use municipal electric aggregation to do something different. As far as I can see, every single city just does short-term contracts, best rate they can get, and then they throw in RECs, maybe not at the end. It's not entirely clear that you could or could not do a long-term power purchase agreement for bundled kilowatts and RECs from a renewable facility. It would be very satisfying to be able to do that for a new build, because then you're guaranteed that sense of additionality. It's something I want to look at. We've got our aggregation period is just starting. We've got 2 years to figure out what we want to do next. The market will be completely different in 2 years from now. So it's something I'm interested in. Next is include purchase of green power partnership qualified renewable energy credits in municipal electric aggregation agreements. So that's looking forward. Currently, our municipal electric aggregation agreement does not specify any details for the renewable energy credits. They buy whatever they want and on our behalf and retire them. What's happened is, on occasion, the vintage of those RECs is too old to qualify for the US EPA's Green Power Partnership, so we're not able to join that just yet. We can ask them to buy newer vintage RECs, but they don't have to because it's not in the contract. So that's what that goal is addressing. That doesn't really change our accounting, but it is a qualitative factor that some people have asked questions about. Evaluate long-term purchase opportunities for bundled renewable power and renewable energy credits. That's what I've been referring to when we've talked to a wind turbine facility about buying power from them. Evaluate group purchasing to achieve competitive pricing for solar energy systems. Again, that's what Chicago is doing right now. We will see what their performance is like. I've talked to several of the players in that program. Some of them, one of them works nationwide. One question I asked of them that they didn't have an answer for immediately was, what do you end up spending per, for program cost per kilowatt of solar energy capacity installed? And then immediately have a measure for that. I can tell you how much kilowatts were installed in their program in Colorado, in California, but didn't have that number.
Yeah, and you remember probably the number's not capacity installed, but generated. I mean, because of the capacity factor issues too. Was there an action 4 in this list?
No, I copied and pasted this from InDesign. So
is there special value in calling out the solar energy just because there's a specific program that you're proposing we look at? I mean, as opposed to, so action 3 looks at, purchasing renewable power. Action 5 is really just a sharp, a particular one calling about the solar, but there's other forms of renewable energy that may not have such price hurdles as solar.
I guess what I'm thinking of here is on-site. Technically you can put wind turbine on-site, so I guess we could leave it more open.
Biomass. I mean, is it feasible? Are there technologies that Urbana residents could consider to heat their homes with biomass of various kinds? I have no idea.
I don't know. I don't know if there's anything that's
would have acceptable air quality,
Yeah. Yeah. Next category, climate adaptation. We've just recently had a bunch of speakers on climate adaptation. And I've spoken on the phone to more folks as well. And if you ask, folks that are within a particular sector like transportation or public works or public health, and we talk about here's the impacts, a lot of what we heard was, well, we're already addressing that, or we're already set up to address that. All you're telling me is that there's going to be more of it, and when there is, we'll deal with more of it. So, a lot of those speakers, I did not come away with an immediate, okay, here's what we do, or here's what we do different. If there are, say, more disease vectors, the only goal that we were left with was, well, continue to fund us. Well, I think the only change would actually be fund us more, right? And I think you don't necessarily plan to spend more money. You spend more money when you have to, I guess, on those sorts of things. So that may be one you sort of wait for. One item that I think did stand out to me as sort of a fundamental change that we could potentially plan for the future was the design standards for stormwater retention and detention facilities. They're designed backward-looking over some time frame. I don't know I believe the Illinois State Water Survey decides what a 50-year storm is. And what if your backward-looking, data set is the last 100 years, and things have been quite different the last 20 and will be more like the last 20 rather than the last 50, then your design standards are not going to be correct for the next 20. Does that make sense? That might have been really confusing. Sort of. Okay. So I think there may be a goal in there that is, useful and achievable for climate adaptation. It's not something we directly control. It would be something we could engage with and influence. I'd love to hear feedback on that.
I support that 100%. I was wondering if it's a potentially small add, but I think the testimony we got from Mike Brunk suggested that there was potential for tree planting, more aggressive or more substantial tree planting, potentially with an emphasis on shading houses and that kind of thing, diversity, species selection with climate change in mind, in terms of hardiness zones and that kind of thing. But that's the kind of thing that you don't wait until the need is there. You do have to act in advance to benefit from a mature canopy. 20 years from now, we need to plant it now.
That makes me think of sort of green infrastructure. And I was curious, with the council sort of not taking up our recommendation, did they discuss why they didn't think that was
No.
important? Because
No.
I guess my thinking is that, when it comes to climate adaptation, that some of the factors that would go into that would be things that would be under immediate control and would contribute to.
Now, there's no discussion at council on our section, the environmental sustainability section of council goals. With respect to what is a 50-year flood, that particular question, that's one we don't control. I think cities do control whether their design standards are, say, a 50-year flood or a 100-year flood. Switching from 50 to 100 would be kind of a coarse way, I think, to handle it. Perhaps effective if you build a bigger hole for your stormwater.
But I'm thinking of, I guess I'm also thinking of other elements, such as tree canopy, using lighter materials for pavements, all those kinds of things that can create a cooler temperatures for people in the middle of the summer, and taking elements, and that's just like a couple of random examples, but not simply looking at it in terms of sort of the great infrastructure that we have, the sewer system that can handle a 100-year flood, but also kind of looking for adaptation about, okay, if we're going to be dealing with more temperature extremes and things like that, what are the things that can be done in terms of infrastructure to mitigate some of that?
I think we can certainly put those in this plan. I do wonder about the action or the intent to shade houses. I think that's a good thing, but is it mitigation or is it adaptation? I don't know.
It's kind of both. I think a lot of things are going to end up being sort of in both categories.
I'm sure Mike Brunk would love to see it in the plan. And then we also, in the original plan, we had a section for partnering, collaborating. I don't remember exact terms. But I included Act on Energy. We've partnered with them, the Home Energy Performance Program. We're partnering with them currently with the Urbana-Champaign Energy Star Challenge. It's a great organization to partner with. I know that they had, it was mentioned working with schools earlier, they had I think what seemed like a pilot test for a school program where they provide home energy efficiency kits, and they come into the classroom and they do a talk, and they send each student home with a light bulb, faucet aerator, that kind of thing. I don't know if that will continue, if it will scale up. I think they were testing it to see what kind of data feedback they got. They have to have some sort of evidence that they're reducing X amount of, greenhouse gases or kilowatts used per state rules. And of course, they're going to work to do that in the cheapest, most efficient way possible. So I suspect that they were going to see, is this an efficient way to reduce that? I think that might be, a potential partnership. And I've already worked to connect Act on Energy and the Urbana School District on that particular program. But that's an example of where we can leverage some existing resources to do more work here. So that is my short list, or my conservative list there.
I was just thinking about the Energy Star partnership. We've got 50 commercial businesses, and commercial sector is our biggest piece of the pie in terms of climate. And so we have, in some different places on here, we talk about bundling different types of projects together to reduce soft costs and transaction costs. We don't talk about that kind of concept in terms of energy efficiency, or at least I didn't notice any references to that. But what I guess where I'm going with that is that, so I'm hearing people starting to talk about bundling energy efficiency on multiple buildings, maybe on a neighborhood basis. If we want to talk about the commercial side of things, I wonder if we can look at that Energy Star project with a lens of bundleability, like picking out common projects that are in those things, and then, of course, everyone who's going to be in it has to agree to do it. But anyway, just another category of investigation would be bundling energy efficiency projects according to whatever category. But that Energy Star challenge might be a good data set to look at, our first chance to look at some data.
Yeah, and we will get good data out of that because folks will be submitting their statement of energy performance. I'm trying to remember what's on that statement. I don't know if it has kilowatts, but it does have energy use intensity, if not their Energy Star score, if they're a qualifiable space type. I think one of the co-benefits for a program like the Energy Star Challenge is the relationship building that can be called on later for additional projects and programs like you're describing.
Do you think we could call on some of those participants, like if we wanted to, in this, phase 2 process, if we want to call a session on, say, commercial, if we could round up some of those folks, and just, maybe think of some other stakeholders, expert stakeholders in some of the buildings, and anyways, that could be one thing we could do, rounding up stakeholders in this process.
Was there a particular project types that you had in mind for that the different businesses or buildings would collaborate on?
I don't know. I haven't seen any of the reports on the building. I haven't looked at the data or the projects myself.
I've seen some case studies where a small group of businesses or a small group of households will collaborate to put up 20 solar panels on one person's roof or something to that effect, and the others will buy into it and get a credit on their bill. What it seems like some of the common factors are they work with the utility company. The utility company does all of the administration in terms of, okay, you own X amount of that solar panel, therefore, it generated this many, therefore your bill is lowered this much. And a lot of those utilities are small local utilities as well, it seems like. Right. So that's an interesting option, but it may have barriers here, but it's something we can explore.
Right, and I guess proposing the idea of it, so I kind of propose two ideas simultaneously. So I guess I don't mean to impose that if we're going to gather those particular stakeholders that we're going to impose the constraint of, okay, what do we need to do so that you can bundle projects together? That could be one of a whole an open-ended conversation about what are, how do we address some of these challenges, say, in the commercial sector. And that could be one thing. That could be a welcome part of the conversation, but lots of other things too.
Scott, you hear about the university's move to sell carbon credits that they generated?
Yes.
Through the reduction activity. Have you heard of any cities doing that?
I've not. We're doing the opposite. We're buying carbon credits. And it's a little curious. I think maybe the university is surpassing their targets, so they have a few extras to sell, and then
That's right. Their compliance goal, they've beat their compliance goal. They have 3 years in advance, and so they're selling the difference.
And they'll take that money and plow it back into more.
Those are 1 year
projects.
term sales, and so
That's what the other
2015
question. Yeah,
they'll
okay.
accrue back. So they
So in the future,
basically-
they're going to retain all of those credits.
Yes,
and-
they're
and
just selling 1
account
year's
for them.
worth, and so they're selling 2012 vintage, 2013 vintage, 2014 vintage. 2015 is their compliance year, and they'll be back where they were supposed to be in 2015.
Very interesting.
It's pretty interesting. I mean, they generated. Bart, you could probably speak to this better than I or Todd. But the facilities and services SWAT team or whatever it's called, did very intensive audits on buildings and I think some contracting policies. And you have to wonder, so a couple things here, that they're adopting a market approach to their reductions. They're clearly monetizing some reductions that they made and using that to pursue more. Mm-hmm. But then it raises the question of, are they going to really have firm borders on campus? Is that the long-term message they want to pursue for their climate reduction, giving it's a global atmosphere and they're here in a community? And you have to wonder what the community might be able to accomplish in a bundled fashion, whether the next 50 buildings that should be retrofit are all on campus or not. And I'm curious what goes into that verified carbon standard. There's the tons that they're selling have to be quantified or verified in a way, and so clearly there's some rigor or standard and process and cost to do that verification. I'm wondering how much of a hurdle that might be, but anyway, it raises questions. I thought it was interesting, and if anyone else knows more about that or thinks that might be relevant to us, I'd be interested in hearing about it.
Not a lot more, but I can add on a little bit, and that is that the money received then needs to go back into emissions reduction projects. So I'm kind of looking forward to, okay, what's that going to be spent on? And how could that perhaps fit in, community projects and the like that will reduce emissions for the university.
Further thoughts, further discussion? All right. Well, I know we'll be continuing these discussions at our next couple of meetings. Let's move on to new business. We don't have any in front of us. Moving on to announcements. We already discussed the joint meeting tentatively set for July 10th. Are there other announcements this evening? Seeing none, let's move on to adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?